The House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee are kind of working on resolutions to allocate money for these tax cuts that are actually meeting today. So the number is still, we don't know what the final trillion amount they're going to give the Ways and Means Committee for creating these tax cuts.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by economics reporter Zach Halaschak. Zach, American consumers have received the kind of bad news that the Kansas City Chiefs recently got. What is the latest on this persistent inflation that we've been seeing?
First of all, go Birds. But yeah, the most recent consumer CPI report came in and showed that inflation's running hot at 3%. So it increased another 1/10 of a percentage point. That's now several months in a row of this slowly creeping back up. The Fed wants to see inflation running at 2%, so it's a full percentage point above what is considered healthy for the economy. Obviously, this is moving the opposite direction. It's not good news for President Trump. It's his first CPI report since he's come into office. Obviously, it's not good for consumers because people have been under the pressure of years now of inflation. I think it's 21% overall since Biden entered office, so just over 4 years ago. And so it also means the Fed's going to have to hold interest rates higher for longer, which also causes pain for consumers, makes things like taking out credit card debt, buying a car more expensive. So now most investors are kind of expecting the next rate cut to, instead of coming in like May, to come in like September. So it pushes that back a bit. Just is bad news overall.
So what's the status of the Trump tax cuts? There's this push in Congress to renew them. There are a lot of different provisions that are being disputed. What's going on right now?
I mean, that's the biggest legislative goal of this year, and frankly, probably of Trump's presidency, is going to be extending out, Republicans hope making permanent the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is better known as the Trump tax cuts. So when this was passed back in 2017, a lot of the provisions in that, not all, but most of them, were made to sunset or expire after 8 years or so. Some have already expired and haven't been renewed. But the reason they were done that way was, there's some legislative things involved, parliamentarian, but also because it saved on costs, so it made the overall package look less expensive, add less to the deficit. So now here we are back in this do or die year. If we don't do anything, if Congress doesn't do anything by the end of the year, most Americans will see a tax hike. Democrats will like to pan it as, a giveaway to the very wealthy, but if you look at it, the overwhelming majority of Americans saw lower taxes because of these tax changes. So be hugely politically unpopular if they allow these to expire. So right now, Republicans are working on getting a fiscal package through a process called budget reconciliation, which is kind of complicated, but basically it allows the Senate and the House to pass the legislation by a simple majority vote and avoids the Senate filibuster of 60 votes.
Which in effect gives them the ability, at least in the Senate, to shut Democrats out of the process.
Yeah, correct. They don't need a single Democrat vote. All they need is 50 Republicans. So that's where we're at now. We're still very early stages. The House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee are kind of working on resolutions to allocate money for these tax cuts that are actually meeting today. So the number is still, we don't know what the final trillion amount they're going to give the Ways and Means Committee for creating these tax cuts. Should be somewhere in the range of 4.5 to 5.5 trillion, somewhere in there. That's about a little more than the cost of extending TCJA as is, straight extension. But then on the campaign trail, if you remember, Trump proposed all these other tax ideas, like no taxes on tips, eliminating taxes on Social Security income, et cetera. And so a lot of those are very expensive. And so it's going to be kind of a wheeling and dealing situation on the Ways and Means Committee to try to figure out which ones should be included and which ones maybe should be pared back down a bit. And it's going to be difficult because there's such a small majority in the House to get all the members on board. And they pretty much need every single member on board for this.
So there's been a lot of talk in the Trump administration about cutting various government agencies, paring them back. There's one Obama-era agency that is particularly in the crosshairs right now. What is it?
Yeah, it's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. It's not maybe the most well-known of the agencies. It's newer, as you said, was created in the Obama era, post 2008 financial crisis fallout. But basically, it's kind of tasked with monitoring and regulating banks and practices like consumer, like junk fees and cutting down on corporate practices that it considers that are not legal and should be reined in. And it's long been a big target of the banks. It's long been a target of Republicans, many of whom don't even think the agencies should exist in the first place.
Right.
And so now that Elon Musk is helping out Trump with, Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, kind of clearing out all these agencies, it's kind of the next target. And he went in and basically froze, they fired Rohit Chopra, who is very disliked by Republicans, very disliked by the big banks. Went in and fired Rohit Chopra, and then brought in Russ Vought, who's the OMB director, on an acting basis, to kind of just like freeze everything that CFPB was doing, stop issuing new rules, stop the RFIs, all this stuff, just kind of go in and just gunk things up.
And Vought is kind of viewed as sort of the cut man.
He is, that's kind of why he was put in that place, is to take things, with the hammer and just kind of go in and break things up, these huge bureaucratic organizations and agencies. So now they just announced recently that Trump has nominated Jonathan McKernan, who was at FDIC before, so he's now the nominee for director. So I don't know if that's a sign that maybe they'll, instead of just trying to axe the whole thing, they'll try to reform it or transform its vision or role. But basically right now, CFPB is kind of just in a holding space and a freeze, and obviously there's already been lawsuits filed from some of the CFPB employees, trying to stop this kind of gutting of the agency. But it's like it's kind of in a holding pattern right now, and we're waiting to see what the courts say, and also what if the new director is confirmed, what he ends up doing with the agency.
All right, there's still a lot of things that are in limbo right now.
That's right.
Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
You can read Zach and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.